I don't know if it's over the last few years or maybe this has been an ongoing pervasive issue. I know it's gotten worse over the last few years since we lost a lot of the ability to interact with people due to this pandemic and being shut down and isolated. But we've lost that ability to just be a human and just really explain and come up front, come be upfront about what's bothering you and what that other person is doing.
Welcome to Happy to Offend You. Life guarantees that somebody's going to be offended by anything that you do. In fact, somebody right now is offended by life itself, but they don't have to be. This show guarantees that someone is going to be liberated from being offended by somebody else's offensive behavior. What? Yes, we said it. This show sets out to prove not only how to be liberated from being offended, and also how to be happy to offend. So if you're already offended, welcome to the show. And here's your host of the very offensive, Michelle Nedelec. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'd like to welcome you to Happy to Offend You, where you will understand and discover why. Just because somebody's offended you, it doesn't mean that you're going to die. In fact, if you can understand why they're happy to offend you, then we can actually create better connections, better communication. And in fact, you get to learn how to happily offend other people by being your true self, showing the world how amazing and awesome you are. And that makes the world a better place. So I'd like to welcome you to introduce you to my most amazing guest, Eric. Eric, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Michelle, thanks so much for having me. Can't wait to get started. This is great.
Awesome. So give us a highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
Sure. I always say, I think I told you this before, I'm an expert jerk who turned jerk expert. And that really inspired me to write this book, author this book called How to Work with Jerks, How to Get Stuff Done with People You Can't Stand. I'm also a conflict resolution expert, and I work with various leaders to help them mitigate that workplace friction, so that way they can achieve those wildly important goals that they have on their plate. And this really helps them build a more harmonious, more cohesive, collaborative work environment. So that's pretty much what I do.
I love it. So let's kind of back up the bus a bit. And how did you get into this field as your area of interest? And then we'll get into kind of when did you discover that you were such a jerk if they don't coincide?
Well, I mean, I think it does coincide, actually. I mean, after, years of, in the past being a jerk, I didn't realize that until, obviously after the fact, but going through that experience of just having terrible relationships with the people that I worked with and served, and then hearing about other people's stories about how hard it is for them to manage relationships or even continue working at a certain workplace because their boss is a jerk or they can't stand their coworkers. And I meet so many talented people in life. And one of the things that I hear from them often is that these talented people who can have pretty much any job that they choose, these people are deciding to leave, or they decide not to work at that certain place anymore. And I'm figuring, why? Why do they have to find another place to work? And it all comes down to this core thing, the inability to manage relationships with the people that you work with and serve. And so, through those experiences, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to come up with some kind of guide, some kind of manuscript that can help people in these specific situations, so that way they don't have to leave that job, or they'll learn how to use those tools, because you can't leave every job. You're going to run into those situations. So I wanted to come up with a roadmap to help not only business professionals, but even people going into the workplace, like college students, understand what it's like to use specific skill sets to manage those types of relationships.
So I'm going to ask you a trick question. When you discover that you're having conversations with a jerk, whose responsibility is it to take care of that?
Well, it all depends on the situation. It all depends on the situation and how you want to approach it as well. Sometimes it requires some tact. Sometimes it requires you to be upfront and let the person know what's really going on and how they're behaving as well. Ultimately, if you're dealing with coworkers, or people in the workplace, it would be ideal if you had these kind of relationship building techniques or team building skills to understand what compels people to act the way they do. Sometimes when you're dealing with customers or people just that you rarely have in contact with, and they come off like a jerk, you don't know why, or you don't know what's causing it at all. which means that you have to use a bit of tact to figure out what they're doing and how, and let them know how it's offending you. And so that's why I'm glad to be on this Happy to Offend You podcast, because it really takes tact and it really takes courage to be able to speak up in those situations.
Or tact or courage.
Yeah, right.
Because we will discover that it doesn't really have to be all of the above. Because I know that at one point in time in life when I actually had jobs, there was one job in particular that I absolutely loved my job. So it was a construction company. I was the project communications person, so making sure that everybody on the site knew when they were coming and going and all that kind of fun stuff. And one of the project managers was just having a really shitty day, and I just lost it on him. I'm like, get off your high horse. I'm saying it very politely right now.
Right,
It was very
right,
heated. Everybody in the
right.
office heard the conversation. It's like, get off your high horse, sit your ass down, and like, let's have a conversation. And it was, tact was not my forte, but
Mhm.
I knew that I had kind of had enough, but I also knew that he was just having a shitty day. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that's kind of the reining in of things. But I think sometimes too, when people are offended, it's knowing that we don't really know who's caused it at that point. Because I know in my personal relationships, I think that my spouse caused it and he thinks I caused it, and nobody else is there to witness the facts. So
Right.
it's like, who's right? And oftentimes I just go, if you're the first one to notice it, great. Now it's your responsibility. Take it on, because you were the first one to notice that this conversation isn't going the way you want it to.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that can be one of the most helpful things, to just be upfront and honest with someone. Sometimes people are afraid to do that because they don't want to offend someone, or they don't want to rub someone the wrong way. But if you're upfront with that person, I think they'll respect you more out of the situation. And I think they'll be more amenable to have that conversation with you, either at that time or a later time, but at least they know where you come from. And I don't know if it's over the last few years, or maybe this has been an ongoing pervasive issue. I know it's gotten worse over the last few years, since we lost a lot of the ability to interact with people due to this pandemic and being shut down and isolated. But we've lost that ability to just be a human and just really explain and come up front. Be upfront about what's bothering you, and what that other person is doing. Sometimes we have to we let our ego become our amigo, and some people are afraid to, either on the recipient side, how that person might bruise somebody's ego, or if that person brings up if another person brings up the situation that something's affecting them, then their ego might be bruised, because they may think, wow, I'm admitting that someone hurt my feelings. And sometimes people don't want to approach it that way either. So it's being upfront. I think at the end of the day, that can really be helpful no matter what. And that's why, Happy to Offend You, it's about being honest. It's about being upfront and explaining how you feel about a situation.
Absolutely. I love it. So when somebody kind of finds themselves in these situations, what are some of the things that they can do to be able to navigate the waters of communication?
Well, I think one of the most helpful things, this I do a lot, I do this a lot with a lot of the clients that I work with, a lot of business leaders, especially if they've been in an organization, they've been leading a team for a while, or maybe they're newly installed as that leader, and you've got a bunch of people that are just, there's a lot of turnover, so you've got people that you haven't been working with in some time. One of the very first things that I recommend that people do is complete this core values exercise. And it's an easy exercise to do, but it's a great team building exercise in which you and your team are able to identify everything that you value and limit those values down to three, your top three core values. And once you do that, you're able to convey and have a better understanding about what your core values are, but you also understand the other person's core values. And now you understand what compels people to act the way they do, because you know where they're coming from. You know their perspective. Oh, well, this person appreciates loyalty, or this person appreciates honesty, or health. Those kind of things helps you understand that person's perspective. But when you're dealing with other situations, like one-on-one conversation, or things happen right there on the fly, sometimes it's important to be upfront. Other times, though, you can use another strategy, which is to really plan how you want to have that conversation. So maybe they may rub you the wrong way that first day, and you know you're going to have ongoing interactions with them. Well, maybe you might want to plan ahead, because you're going to have to value that relationship, and just say, hey, we may not have gotten on the right foot during this conversation, but we've got a bunch of things to work together. I'm willing to to work with you. I wanted to talk about a few things that have not gone so well, and let's just see what we can do to build this relationship. That's at a high level what you would want to do, but that's where that tact comes in, and really planning out how you want to communicate your message, and how you value the person too, because there's certain conflict styles that you can adopt, especially if you value the relationship, that you're going to want to employ to make sure that relationship is sound, and that you're able to build off of that.
Nice. I love this because I think it's so important, one, for entrepreneurs that are going into a leadership role to understand this, because a lot of people will get to the point in their entrepreneurial world where they go, I hate having employees. I feel like I'm babysitting. Everything's a bunch of knitter shit going on. And
Right.
I just go do your jobs. It's
Right.
like, yeah, well, we're kind of human and we don't really do that. So, and we have to, and especially if you have a great team, because in my opinion, a great team is a diversified team where you have somebody who's very cranial thinking and they're problem solving, and they are kind of getting to the crux of, if something goes wrong, somebody's going to die. And then somebody else is like all about the relationships and I just want people to be able to communicate and feel safe and open and honest. And those kind of the two opposite ends of any dynamics. And there's, of course, different personalities that can play in there. But when you get the extreme opposites, that's when you start to get the conflict, because you're coming at the same problem from two very different perspectives. And most people want to solve their problems with cohesion and having somebody to support them and go, yeah, it's just been by, you're right. And in a good team, that doesn't happen.
Right. And you know what makes it even worse, Michelle? It's when our emotions start coming into play. Because once that happens, forget about it. You're going to have tunnel vision. You're not going to be able to think appropriately. And you might say something that you might regret. You might make a knee-jerk reaction, pardon the pun. But it's true. When your emotions, you can get so frustrated, so annoyed with that person and their behavior, and you don't know why that they're acting like that. And that can cause you to act out of character as well. And so that's why it's important, before you even have these conversations, to really assess what you're feeling and why. Because once you're able to do that, then you can manage those emotions, and you can come and respond with a more measured approach. But that's happens anywhere, whether you're in a team building, where you're in a team environment or a one-on-one environment. Understanding how those emotions play is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. And I think too that people don't realize that once the emotions start playing out, and they become elevated, that's when both sides are jerks. And it's like, oh, right, that'd be me. I'm playing in on this. Because as soon as we start playing in on that, that just exacerbates the other side. And then they start, getting defensive or offensive, in order to, one, protect themselves and to keep you at a distance.
Exactly. And that's why I recommend, so I have this 3-step process to help mitigate that, because when you respond in a certain way and your emotions are getting the best of you, you're going to make those knee-jerk reactions. So I encourage people to use the assess, analyze, act method, which is a 3-step process to help manage your emotions. Well, understand your emotions, manage your emotions, and then you can respond accordingly without making those knee-jerk reactions or weakening that relationship. Those things are absolutely critical.
All right. So talk to me about step one, and how do people take themselves out of the situation? Kind of, how do they know they're in one?
Yeah. So the first situation, the first step, when you are in a stressful situation, when you've got competing priorities, or you're working with a jerk, whether they're a boss or a colleague, or you're working with a team, and you need to respond in a certain way, you're dealing with that stress right now, right at that moment. The first thing you need to do is take step one, which is called assess. That means you need to assess what your body's telling you at that moment. Oftentimes, when we're in a stressful situation, our body's telling us this. Our heart could beat fast, our palms could get sweaty, our mouth can get dry, we can clench our jaw. All these things are indicators that your body is under stress, and it's telling you, hey, you're stressed out, man. You need to chill out for a bit. Once you understand what your body's telling you, then you can kind of analyze why. Well, maybe I didn't like what my boss told me, or maybe I'm so sick and tired of dealing with this colleague who just won't see my side of things. Once you're able to analyze why your body is signaling those stressful signals to you, then you can take a step back. You could take a measured approach and respond more thoughtfully, because now you know that what your emotions are telling you, why it's causing you that, and it'll force you to take a more measured approach, because you don't want to make that situation worse. So assess first, analyze, and then act.
What? It's not act first and then figure out what you did, why you did
How
what
many
you
times
did,
have
and
we
go,
done that, right?
oh, hey, I just realized that I did that.
Right,
Doing it
right.
in the backwards order. I mean, I'm sure we all do that at some point in our lives. But
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes we don't think. The only way that three-step process works is through practice. You have to
Mm.
continuously be mindful of it. When I started doing it, I had a sticky assess, analyze, act. That's when I was dealing with some really stressful situations, and I had to remind myself to continue to do that before I ruin a relationship. And so if you are able to do that time and time again, you're going to be more mindful to use it. Case in point, Starbucks, I think they had a similar model. They called it latte, and that was to address irate customers that were coming in with unhappy with their service. Well, Starbucks uses a latte method to make sure that they control their behavior and their response when interacting with those customers.
Nice. I love that, and easy to remember. Well, and I think too that a lot of time, like in the days of binders, it was a little easier to have a little, a note at the front. Just have those 3 steps there, so you can flip back to the front cover, and all you look is pensive while you're sitting there going through the steps in your head. But how, if somebody's got like iPhones or iPads and things like that, how do you recommend that they kind of bring this to the forefront, especially if they've known that it's become problematic, that either they have somebody that's problematic in their business, or they're just kind of headbutting with people all the time?
And so technology, phones, laptops, all that stuff is great for us, but it can actually hinder our ability to manage relationships. I've been in situations, when I've consulted with different organizations, where I've seen, an employee try to talk to their boss, and their boss is just on their computer, or they're looking at their phone and completely, trying to be in the moment, but they're not. Something else is taking away from their attention. And that signals to the employee that that person doesn't value your time or what you have to say. And right at that moment, that's the communication. It doesn't even have to be verbal, it's nonverbal right there. And when we get used to this kind of technology, it can make a bad situation worse. So what I encourage people to do when you have that one-on-one meeting with someone, when you're having a conversation with someone, put that cell phone, put that laptop away. Or if you're not in a position to have that conversation because you've got something else going on more that you think that might be more important on your cell phone or on your laptop, well, let that person know, hey, can we schedule this certain time to meet? All right. That gives you and that person the respect that they deserve to have that time that they need to talk to you about that certain situation. So yes, while technology such as those items can really be helpful, when you're building a relationship, when you're trying to manage conflict, it could actually work against you. So I recommend you put those cell phones, that laptop, you put it away and give that person your undivided attention.
Very cool. And so I'm thinking, if I was in a meeting with my boss and they're sitting there on their phone, I would be tempted to grab my phone and text them and go, hey, are you busy right now?
Yeah, yeah. Or, or or do what some other people say, hey, is this a good time? I see you're on your phone. That those are, just, hey, can we talk right now or what? What's going on? So and that helps the boss understand that, yes, I'm not in the moment. I'm not fully present to my employee. Maybe I should put this away. And then if they continue to do that, you might want to say, how about I schedule a time where it's just one-on-one, where there's no distractions. Because you're going to need to do that. And if they still aren't willing to do that, then It's exactly what the title of my book. They're probably a jerk, and they don't respect you enough to give you that undivided attention, or they may not know how to give you that undivided attention. And that means that bravery needs to come out.
Yeah, and I think how is going to be a lot of more of an issue coming up, especially with people who have kind of learned their social skills as adults during the lockdown. So
Yeah.
it's going to be like, how do you, because I've seen couples at dinner with their phones kind of chatting with each other across the table, because it's just what they're used to, and that's how they're used to connecting, and either it's funny or it's, you know, private or whatever it is for them. So I'm seeing that this is going to be more of an issue as time goes on, with kind of that generation getting on their phones and having those face-to-face meetings via text, which is kind of hilarious.
It
It's
is,
like,
right?
because you get, you know, you're scared, like, well, do I look at them? Do I put where do I put my hands? What do I look like? There's so many other things. It's almost like learning how to drive a standard. It's like, and you just become overwhelmed with standing in front of somebody when you've never had to do it before.
And who knew that technology would have the kind of influence
Right.
the way it has right now on our ability to build relationships? I mean, can you imagine sitting at a dinner table with someone and someone says, "Hey, what do you want to order?" And you're looking at your phone like, "Oh, well, I don't know, whatever's on the menu." You know what I mean? Or it's just so things have just gotten so topsy turvy lately. It's
Well,
just
and it could be weird because they could be looking at the menu on their phone.
true.
And you're just like, oh, right. Okay. And I
It
think
looks better on the phone than on
they're just
than the
used to it.
actual menu in person.
Like, I don't know what people are used to. And I think part of it is that it's really easy to be offended when somebody doesn't act and talk and walk the same way I do. But in understanding that they probably have a really good reason for doing what they do and why they do it and how they do it. And am I willing to have that conversation to be able to dig that out and figure it out? Because especially if somebody else doesn't understand why they're doing it, they're not necessarily going to be able to articulate, that it's just more comfortable looking at the menu on my phone, or, they're going to snap and go like, I am. It's like throw the phone in your face and go, it's the menu. And then again, I think coming back to, if I'm the one experiencing this awkwardness in communication, it's up to me to make it unawkward, because
Yeah.
really it's clearly they're not having an issue with it.
Well, yeah, that you're definitely right about that. Um, One thing to also note is that, the pandemic has definitely got us out of our, has definitely impacted our ability to build relationships. But it's, you see a lot of it with Generation Z employees as well. A
Mhm.
lot of them, they don't feel prepared to enter the workforce because they don't have those proper social skills. And it's something that doesn't just apply to Generation Z, it's everyone. It's everyone's
Right.
social skills has eroded. And so that's why I'm recommending, when people start entering back into the office, let's do some team building activities. Let's get to know one another. Let's do some core values. What do you value? What pisses you off? What's your communication style? That's another thing that I recommend leaders do. Do a connections preference assessment, which is something where, if I were working in an organization, I would instruct leaders to find out how leaders wish to be how their employees wish to be interacted with. Some people like one-on-one conversations. Other people, appreciate, group settings or lunch and learn meetings, things like that. Once you understand how people wish to be communicated with, then that goes a long way to being at the same level, being at the same level of communicating and interacting. So those are some things that I think could be really helpful.
Nice. I love it. So who would you say is your ideal client, or who comes to you most often, um, for to serve and support?
Well, lately, it's been IT leaders like CIOs. They've got, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but CIOs, they have a ton on their plate, just like a lot of leaders. But what happens is they constantly get pulled down into the weeds to resolve other people's conflict, like their direct reports, the individual contributors, because that conflict is affecting their ability to achieve that goal that the CIO is responsible for attaining. So that CIO has to come down from where they are, stop what they're doing, and try to resolve that conflict. The other situation, the other group that I'm dealing with now, more than ever now, has been higher ed now, the higher ed community. A lot of the students, they're coming back into on campus, and they are not prepared to interact with people, with their professors or with their administrators. But also the school administrators and teachers, there's a lot of burnout going on there, just like with IT, a ton of burnout going on there. But those relationships you know are 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 worse now because they can't interact. They don't know how to adopt those skills. So higher ed and IT are two types of areas where I've been working on the most lately.
Wow. And I would think too that it's going to be really hard to do things like um, dealing with conflict, because it's super easy to isolate and just separate yourself from other people so you don't have to deal with conflict, period. And that avoidance is a technique that can't survive long term. And you can't be the best that you can be if you're afraid of conflict. It's and that, I think, is, there's the people pleaser side of things, there's the avoidance side of things, and there's the whole planet is pissing me off right now kind of end of things. So you get those three people in a room, and all of a sudden now you've got this explosive situation to be able to deal with. So I think it's more important than ever that we get together and resolve
Yeah,
those.
and also understand what your conflict style is, because you mentioned at least one strategy, which is the avoidance. Sometimes people think that avoidance, all right, that's not good, but what you said was perfect. It's good, but it's not a long-term solution, because if you continue to avoid a conflict, it can continuously build and build and build until it explodes beyond your control. But what I see often is that most conflicts occur when someone is trying to collaborate with someone else, but that other person is trying to compete against them. So instead of trying to get everyone on the same page, that other person is saying, no, I'm looking out for my own best interest, not everyone else's. So that's where that conflict occurs a lot, because most people prefer to collaborate. But according to that situation, that other person that's causing that infighting, or maybe the source of that conflict, they may want to just compete and just get their way, or the highway. And that's where a lot of that infighting occurs.
Wow. And that insecurity, I think, in that dynamic makes it even worse. So
Yeah.
is there things that people can do to kind of let go of their insecurities or to combat that?
Well, what I would do, I would encourage them to do what I had to learn the hard way, which is don't allow your ego to become your amigo. Sometimes, when we're insecure, we project an aura of confidence, of I know it all, because you don't want to show that you're weak in an area, or that you don't know something. And that's ego. And you can't allow your ego to become your amigo. So that's one of the things that I would recommend you do. Other things, though, is having those honest conversations with yourself and with other people about where your shortfalls are. Don't be afraid to admit some of those faults. Some people, they suffer from imposter syndrome, and they don't think that they're good enough. So what they do, they respond in certain situations that or they try to let people know that they're not, that they're not good enough, but they are good enough. So you have to fight that imposter syndrome. But I think most notably, though, don't let your ego become your amigo. That can definitely work against you.
Thanks. I love it. So if somebody's going through and they're struggling with conflict in the office or with their teams, how did they start their journey with you and help to get resolution on that?
Well, I would encourage them to hit me up at ewilliamson@tailoredtrainingsolutions.com, or just check out my website, tailoredtrainingsolutions.com. You can get access to me, all the services I provide, and you can schedule a meeting with me, and I'd be happy to share at least 2 to 3 ideas to help you out with your exact situation.
I love it. We will, of course, have all of Eric's links in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on the links to get a hold of them, and of course, open it up in a new browser because we're not done yet. So, wait, no, are there any has there been a time in your life when somebody was offended by something you did and you went, yeah, and I'm happy to, I'm totally cool that you're offended with that. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was. Yeah, there was. I was thinking about this the other day. Um, what's one profession that you really value, but they can really piss you off? For me, it's barbers. People who cut your hair. And the reason for that is because they can do an exceptional job, but sometimes they don't, or they take too long, or they don't value your time. So they schedule another appointment ahead of you, and that could be frustrating. All you want to do is just get your hair done, get your hair cut. And so one time there was a barber a while ago. I needed a haircut for a speaking event. I wanted to get all sharp and nice for it, and the barber just didn't show. And I was going to this barber for years, and I was so pissed. I could not believe it. For me, all it takes is one. In that situation, it just takes one. And the gravity of the situation, like, I did not want to, be or attend this event without my haircut, because it was during COVID, all right, and I needed him more than ever. And so I said, you know what? I'm just not going to go to him anymore. And so one of the things I did was I scheduled another appointment with him. I didn't show. That sounds petty, but I for some reason I wanted that person to know that, yep, I scheduled an appointment with you. You didn't show, so I'm going to schedule another appointment. And I'm not going to show. And then I never showed up again. That's petty, I
Aw.
know, but it's just
Yeah,
that just really irritated me.
totally get it. And I think it's there is a certain kind of there's certain times in life where you just not tolerating things anymore, and you're done, and so be it. And awesome, and that comes down to kind of your boundaries of knowing, hey, I'm just done with this thing. And it could have been because, 6 other people had no showed for things, and he was the last one, and that was just the straw on the camel's back, and we're done. It could have been a myriad of different things. And I think from his perspective, you got to know, hey, it's just shit happens.
It could have been, I mean, truth be told, I was looking for another barber anyway, because I didn't want to travel that far. So this was a really
Exactly.
good excuse for
It's an
me
excuse.
to
Exactly.
to start looking for another one. But I love barbers, but sometimes, it's just like, come on.
Yeah, it's when they cut off 3 feet of my hair unexpectedly that I get choked.
Right?
Going,
Right?
wrong person. Don't know what you were thinking on that one.
Uh-huh.
And I will
Exactly.
not see you again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. You have been absolutely awesome, Eric. Any last words for our peeps?
Um, if you're looking to get a copy of the book, How to Work with Jerks, you can get it on Amazon. Absolutely. You can also go to my website, tailoredtrainingsolutions.com, and you can request a signed copy. I'd be more than happy to sign one for you, mail it to you as well, along with some other great resources to help you not only work with jerks, but manage conflict with the people that you work with and serve.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Awesome time.
Absolutely.
This is great.
Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Well, be sure to share it with your friends. We love helping you be happy to offend others.